climate, community responding to extreme weather, community responding to extreme weather crew. And with us is Mr. Vernon Walker and Ethan McDowell, who will be presenting on extreme weathers and how we can find such solution. Also joining with us from self-help is Leslie Dunn and Jason Purhus. We're so excited to have you here listening to this presentation, as tonight's program will discuss impact of extreme heat, heat-related illnesses, and solution. Presenting also from Boston College, Professor Philip Landrigan, hope I'm saying it correct, Philip. And it is with great pleasure that I turn over this workshop presentation to Mr. Vernon Walker from CREW, who will be giving us his introduction, a product of climate change. Vernon, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I am hippopotamus proud and peacock happy to be on with you all. And welcome to our virtual audience and Facebook land. And to those that are on the call, once again, I'm just elephant happy to be sharing this space and time with you all. So my name, again, is Vernon, and I am the program manager. I have the pleasure of serving as the program manager at the Communities Responding to Extreme Weather. And simply put, what we look to do is to prepare communities across the greater Boston area and Massachusetts, the statewide, in an equitable, inclusive, and resilient way, equitable, sustainable, and an inclusive fashion for climate change and to become climate resilient. So what we know is that extreme heat is a product of climate change. You can show the graph. And we know that climate change is mainly caused by the burning of coal, oil, and gas pollution. So we know that when coal, oil, and gas is used by people, it emits carbon in the air, and then carbon goes in the air and is absorbed into it is absorbed and is known as the greenhouse gas effect. So simply put, we know that because of the greenhouse gas effect and because there's so much carbon being put in the air, that the atmosphere, some refer to as the ozone, with the atmosphere above the earth cannot contain it. So therefore, that's why we see ice melting in the North and the South Pole, and we see all this extreme weather such as hurricanes, sea level rise, heat waves, more precipitation, etc. So let's talk a little bit about some of the impacts of climate change, y'all. So the ecological impact changes, the ecological impact because of climate change. I mentioned some extreme weather and examples of extreme weather. But one of the ecological impacts is changes to vector-borne diseases, growing season, local fishery, invasive species. So for example, mosquitoes that carry malaria, they usually are located in places like India and parts of Africa, but because the earth is warming up, they're going to be moving more, into the Western Hemisphere and even into various parts of the United States. Let's talk about the economical impact. So the economical impact, so that's one example of the ecological impact. The economical impact is a decline in maple sugaring, shortened ski season, and I don't know about y'all, but I like some maple syrup. In fact, I love me some Vermont maple syrup from a sap tree. First time I ever had some Vermont maple syrup from the sap tree, I was blown away. However, that could be threatened, and the production of Vermont maple syrup and maple syrup in general could be threatened because of climate change and the impacts of climate change. Um, let's talk about social impact. The social impact is climate-induced migration, increased inequality. So let's think about this, y'all. I want to, before we go to the next slide, I want to provide a clear-cut example. So in 2005, Hurricane Katrina devastated, in the summer of 2005, August, the Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans and had and affected the economical, social, emotional, and psychological well-being of residents across the city, particularly the Ninth Ward, which is a community made up predominantly of people of color and low income. And because of such, people lost their home, people lost their livelihoods, people began to experience a lost sense of socialgia, which is a lost sense of self and lower self-esteem, etc. And then people began to lose their place in society. And even if we'll look at Hurricane Duran that devastated parts of the Bahamas last year, and hundreds of homes were destroyed and people unfortunately perished. So we understand that there are social impacts that will worsen economical inequality, racial inequality, etc., as these impacts from climate change spotlight the existing structural inequalities in our society. Let's go to the next slide. So let's talk about unpredictable weather patterns. The changing jet stream. So we see from this slide, a stable jet stream is shown, a stream flows on somewhat of a straight path. You see right here, y'all. However, a wavy jet stream allows warm air to move north or colder air to sink deeper into the south. And this is where we are. And this certainly is a result of climate change. Can we go to the next slide? All right, so we talked about heat. So in 1971 to 2000, in that epoch, we saw that there in New England, we're speaking of New England, and for those of you who are watching us, you know that New England experiences 90 days of summer. So between 1971 and 2000, there were 11 days of extreme heat of weather over 90 degrees, with one being over 100. But you'll notice that there is a drastic difference. So check out the epoch from 2015 to 2044. You'll notice that the map shifts a little bit, and we see more increased days over 90 degrees. So we understand, before we go to the next epoch, what we understand next time, and before we go to the next time frame, what we understand is that hot days will become increasingly more frequent. For your reference, you can check out a WBUR article that released last November. If you Google, heat mapping project, WBUR, in fact, I'm mentioned in the article because our crew had an opportunity to help do some data collection. But that article says, written by Miriam Weiser, that Boston and 2100 will feel like Alabama by 2100. Can y'all imagine that? Really hot, really humid, really sticky weather. So now we are going to the epoch of 2055 to 2084. And this is predicted. We understand that science is not exact, but because there are so many different variables and so many different tipping points. But at the worst end of it, we see that there will be over 60-degree days in New England of weather over 90 degrees. So what we have to realize, folks, is that what we have to realize. Thank you. This allows us in this graphic to juxtapose all these different extreme heat days. So what we must understand, folks, is that extreme heat is a killer. So in case you don't know, in 1995, there were 739 people who unfortunately experienced untimely deaths because of the extensive and the drastic heat wave that hit Chicago. You can Google it. And we understand that heat waves are dangerous to those with pre-existing condition, those who are in low wealth and low income communities, Black and brown communities, people in general. So we understand that these extreme heat waves will be coming in longer duration and more intensity. So that's what we do at CREW. We try to prepare people in an equitable, sustainable, and inclusive manner to prepare for these things and to prepare for this extreme weather through social resilience. So now somebody asked a question. Well, I hear somebody said asked the question, said, well, that's all nice and that's all good with this information, but what is a heat wave? Well, I'm really so glad you asked, so we can break it down on a fundamental level. Fundamentally, a heat wave is hot weather that normally lasts 2 or more days. To be considered a heat wave, the temperatures have to be outside the historical averages for a given area. So 2 or more days. We understand the urban heat island effect. We understand that with the urban heat island effect, when there's extreme heat, it produces the urban heat island effect. So heat islands are urbanized areas that experience higher temperature than outlying areas or suburban areas. I mentioned the WBUR article that there was a project of volunteers who worked with the Museum of Science last summer. And I mentioned that some of CREW staff were a part of that. It proved that Dorchester, which is an urbanized area in the city of Boston, in case you don't know, it measured the hottest temperature in the middle of the day. And because that's of the heat urban island effect, because of the lack of trees. So let's continue to read this. Structures such as building, roads, and other infrastructure absorb and re-emit the sun's heat. Daytime temperatures in urban areas are about 1 to 7 degrees higher than temperatures in outlying areas, and nighttime temperatures are about 2 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit. Heat islands exacerbate the impact of heat wave. And I think we certainly got some more slides, and I'm going to now hand it off, I believe, to our next presenter. Is that right? Is the next presenter going now?
Yep, Philip, the floor is yours.
All right, so I want to introduce before he. So I want to introduce Dr. Philip. He can certainly, take it away. And again, we're just so hippopotamus glad that he is with us and peacock proud. So I'm going to put a pin right there and invite Dr. Philip to come on and share with us some of your knowledge.
Reverend Vernon, thank you. It's an honor to be here with you and all the colleagues and to contribute to this good work that you're doing. It's a good effort. It's noble work, and it's important that we should do it. So if you will give me the ability to screen share, I got a few slides here that I'm going to show.
Yep, you should be able to do it using that green button at the bottom of your screen.
Okay, which I'm not seeing. Okay. I'm having trouble with the visualization. I think with this Facebook interface, I can't get that green button.
Can you share for him, Ethan? Can you do a screen share for our wonderful friend, Dr. Philip? Can you screen share for him? If it could.
I don't have his slides.
Okay.
I was able to do it before, but now that we've got this interface, I can't seem to do it. I'm so sorry.
No worries. It should just be at the bottom of your screen.
Yeah, no, I know it. Hang on a minute. Let me see if maybe I can pull something up here.
Can we make him a co-host? Is he a co-host so he could be able to have the
now
ability?
now I've got it. Now I've got it.
Perfect.
Okay. How's that?
All right.
Yeah.
We're almost there. Just a second. Hang on. We'll be there in a minute. Good. Can you, okay? Are you with me?
We're with you.
All right, good. So some of what I'm going to say will emphasize, it'll underscore what what Vernon just said, but that's okay. This is important material, and it's worth saying more than once that is the main cause of global warming, the main cause of the increased heat waves that we're experiencing these days is human activity. And as Vernon said, the main driver of this is the burning of coal, the burning of oil, the burning of natural gas, all these fossil fuels. When we burn them to generate heat, to generate electricity, to drive a car, they release carbon to the atmosphere, carbon dioxide, CO2. That's a gas. It goes up into the air. And once it's in the atmosphere, it doesn't just disappear. It hangs around for decades, in some cases even for centuries. It surrounds the Earth like a great blanket. And Vernon showed you that picture of the heat rays coming in from the sun, the yellow heat rays coming in from the sun. Well, this blanket around the Earth traps that solar heat close to the surface of the Earth. And that's why the temperature of the Earth has been rising steadily for the last 200 years, since about 1800, since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, which is when human beings started burning large amounts of coal and oil. And every day, every week, every year, that we continue mindlessly to burn fossil fuels, we're putting more greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere, and the situation is only going to get worse until our society begins to take some smart action to deal with this problem at the source, which basically means getting away from coal, oil, and gas and moving to clean fuels like solar, like wind. So we know that climate change has a whole number of negative effects on human health, and Vernon talked about these. Heat waves is one, air pollution is another, storms and hurricanes and coastal flooding. He mentioned the increased range of diseases like malaria and dengue. Dengue has been in the Caribbean for a long time, but now it's coming into the southern United States as the country gets warmer, and it'll continue to spread north. Everybody is affected by heat. Nobody likes a heat wave, but the people who suffer the worst effects of it are these people. So my background is a medical doctor. I'm trained as a pediatrician. So I think a lot about how climate change affects people, and especially children. And what really worries me about the growing frequency of heat waves is that it's little babies, it's children, it's the elderly. It's also people with chronic diseases, children with asthma, adults with heart disease, people with diabetes, especially if those people are living in poverty, if they're living in a city where they're surrounded by the urban heat island that Vernon talked about. All of these risk factors pile up one on top of the other and make for bad outcomes in people who are at high risk. And these are some of the heat effects that people suffer. They get cramps, they get exhaustion, they get heat stroke, which can cause them to faint and fall out, be unable to move. If they've got cardiovascular disease, which is of course heart disease or lung disease, the hot weather and the air pollution that typically goes with the hot weather aggravates their heart disease, makes it difficult to breathe. They can't cool off. Their heart is working overtime to try to cool the body, and they can have a heart attack. And we see heart attacks during heat waves. Vernon mentioned the big heat wave that occurred in 1995 in Chicago. I think he said the number was 769 people died in this. So this is a little chart that shows what happened. The heat wave started on July 12th. And the heat index is the blue line that you see here at the top of the slide that I'm tracing. That's the heat wave. And all of a sudden, when the heat wave hit, this is called the heat index. And when the heat index was up, you had deaths from heart disease, cardiovascular disease. They didn't start right away. It took a day to build up because these things take a little bit of time to get rolling. But once the number of deaths started to build up here on the 13th of July, which was about a day into the heat wave, they started going up and up and up on the 14th, up on the 15th, even as the heat wave was beginning to taper off and beginning to abate. You can see the number of deaths stayed up and took a long time to come down. So it was from the 12th to the 17th, so pretty much a week of intense heat in Chicago. And every one of those days, people were dying in excessive numbers from heart disease and other chronic conditions. There was another one in Europe in 2003. You can see the red areas in Central Europe, especially in France and Germany. And thousands of people died there. It was especially elderly people living in apartments. Most apartments in Europe have no air conditioning because historically it's been a cold climate. They've never needed it, but they were hit very hard with this heat wave in 2003. And you can see over the right-hand side here, this hospital ward with people stacked up on the gurneys and in the wheelchairs because there was no other place to put them. The system was just overwhelmed. Vernon talked about how heat waves are going to get worse. And this is another graph that makes that same point. And it compares 3 different years, 1993, so 27 years ago, 2020, the present, and 2050, 30 years into the future. And you have 3 bars for each city, for Los Angeles, Phoenix, Dallas, and so on. There's 3 bars, the white bar for 1993, the gray for 2020 for this year, the black, what we project is going to happen in 2050. And you can see in every city without exception, LA, Phoenix, Dallas, St. Louis, Atlanta, New York and Boston more or less track each other. You're going to see this problem getting worse and worse and worse. More and more hot days, more heat waves, more sickness, more untimely death. And when it gets hot, air pollution gets worse. And when you have the combination of heat and air pollution, you have all of the problems that I've already alluded to, more asthma in children, more breathing difficulty in adults with lung disease, more heart attacks and more strokes in people who have heart disease and diabetes and obesity and hypertension. And then on top of that, Vernon mentioned this as well, but it's important to reemphasize because after all, Boston is a city built on the seacoast. We're going to see more violent storms. We're going to see sea levels rise. The sea level is going to rise because the great glaciers up in Greenland and other places are melting. And so more water is pouring into the sea. The sea level rises. And it doesn't mean that we're flooded all day, every day. But what happens is when you have the combination of violent storm, increased rainfall, melting ice caps, you get situations like happened in New Orleans. This is New Orleans after Katrina. I mean, most of the time New Orleans doesn't look like this, of course, but when you get a hurricane, rainfall, the wrong combination of tide and weather, this is the kind of thing that happens. And think about Boston. A lot of the city is built on low land. The new waterfront development in South Boston, pretty much all the Back Bay, parts of Cambridge. Dorchester and Roxbury are actually a little higher up. They're in a fortunate position. But much of Boston could easily be underwater if we had the wrong combination. What year is it going to happen? I don't know. Nobody knows. God knows, perhaps. We don't. But it's one of these years it's going to come, and we have to be prepared for it. And I'll close with this slide that reminding us all that we got to take this seriously. We can't just lay back and pretend it's not going to happen. Some people in the White House can perhaps have the luxury of making up those fantasies, but not the rest of us. And we have to take this seriously. We have to take action. And that's why it's so important that we're engaging in the kind of educational enterprise that we're engaging in today. And at that point, I will stop sharing my screen and thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Philip. This is very informative and eye-opening. And with all that being said, and your point that you made about, you know, inaction is going to be the greatest roadblock and the number one thing that is a risk to our health. I'm going to turn it over to Leslie Dunn and Jason. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the solutions that we have available to combating extreme weather and extreme heat. So they're going to speak on behalf of Self-Help and give us a little overview about what they do.
Hey, thanks, Ethan. So I'm Leslie Dunn. I'm with Self-Help, Inc. We are a community action agency that covers 31 communities in southeastern Mass, with Brockton being one of our largest communities that we serve. Jason Pruce is our Director of Conservation, and we're going to just show a quick video on the services that Self-Help can provide to you. And then after that, Jason's going to talk a little bit more specifically around the services that the Conservation Department provides to help people conserve energy, save money, and reduce their energy burdens in general. So I'm just going to share my screen and show you a quick video on the self-help services. Great. So Jason, do you want to talk a little bit about the conservation services, and if, oh, sorry. If you want to talk a little bit about the conservation services and some of the things that Self-Help could help Brockton and surrounding town residents with?
Sure. As Leslie said, we service Brockton and 32 surrounding towns in the area. And our energy conservation program is designed to do just that, conserve energy. And that fits into what we're talking about today, because the less energy we have to use to stay warm or stay cool during the winter or the summer, the less greenhouse gas we're going to wind up generating and emitting into the atmosphere. So we do that through 3 different methods. The first is our AMP program, which is an appliance management program that helps people reduce the cost of their electric utility that they use. So we can replace light bulbs with new energy efficient LED light bulbs. We can replace old energy inefficient appliances such as washing machines and refrigerators with new, more efficient models so that they'll use electricity. So this both helps in terms of saving energy that the power plants need to be able to produce that emit the greenhouse gases, and it also helps save our clients more money on their monthly electric expenditure. We also have a HeartWAP program, which is a heating system assistance program, where we're able to help people maintain, repair, and replace their heating systems. So older heating systems that may fail or may be very inefficient would be items that our clients would qualify to have replaced. And we do approximately 250 to 300 heating system replacements every year with more energy efficient systems, so that'll help them consume less less oil and less energy. And then the third program that we have is our weatherization program. And the goal of that is to be able to help insulate and weatherize homes so that the heat that we generate during the winter stays in the home longer than it did before, therefore causing that client to have to use the heating system less, burn less fuel, emit less greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And again, the less fuel that they need to burn, the more money they're going to wind up saving, keeping their home warm during the wintertime. This can also work reverse in the summertime when it's really hot out. If there's insulation in the walls, it's going to take longer for the home to warm up during the day. And if there's air conditioning in the home, that's going to help retain some of that cooler air in the home so that that client wouldn't have to use as much air conditioning and as much electricity to maintain a reasonably comfortable atmosphere. So those are three of the programs that we help our clients with on a day-to-day basis. We serve for the heating systems 200 to 300 clients a year. The same for the insulation, and for the appliance management program with the light bulbs, we serve about 1,000 clients a year. So we're trying to help as many people as we can, reduce their costs and reduce the burden on the environment as well.
Awesome. Thank you guys both from Self-Help. Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that a lot of the people who struggle with heat this summer are also the same people that might struggle with heating their house in the winter. So that's important to keep in mind, as well as that point Jason just made that, you know, getting your house weatherized is going to go a long way when it comes to keeping that cool air in. I'm going to go over some other solutions that we have here. A lot of this stuff is kind of up to us, right? So how do we deal with extreme heat? Obviously, the simple solutions are, you know, getting an air conditioning unit, finding a cool place like a cooling shelter. But as we've seen with COVID-19, it's difficult to find cooling shelters, and for everyone accessing an AC or a dehumidifier, there can be some large barriers there. So just going over some of the stuff. First and foremost, focusing on yourself as an individual. It's really important during extreme heat to drink plenty of water. You know, even drinking water when you feel as if you're not dehydrated yet, it's important recognizing those hot days, those heat waves like Vernon and Philip mentioned, that's above the historical norm. Recognizing that and having a lot of fluids in your system. Avoid things like caffeine and alcohol. They actually make you more dehydrated. You know, dressing appropriately, wearing loose clothing, trying to stay away from darker materials that absorb heat. Also skin conditions too, like trying to avoiding sunburn, so wearing large hats. Even if you can wear a lightweight long sleeve that's going to protect more of your skin surface area, can make a huge difference. On your bed, using sheets, changing the sheets as well, not trying to have a lot of moisture stick around there. And then a really important thing as well is trying to avoid strenuous activity. So maybe putting off some of those errands, maybe waiting to go grocery shopping until the evening and trying to avoid doing it during the hottest parts of the day. Within your own house, there's a lot of different things that a person can do to try to combat the heat, even without an AC unit. So a lot of it is unplugging unnecessary electronics, which actually produce a lot of heat, just having things plugged in. So trying to make sure to unplug your phone charging cables or computer charging cable that's not in use. Things like your microwave, larger appliances that you might not be using all the time that don't need to be plugged in. They actually do produce heat. Something that the folks from Self-Help mentioned as well, changing out light bulbs can not only save you money, but also some of these older, more conventional bulbs actually produce a lot of heat. So trying to either change those out, and if not possible, try to avoid using your lights during the day and using natural light if possible. You know, or if you have the ability, changing over to cooler bulbs like LED bulbs can make a big difference. As well as avoiding cooking indoors. There's a lot of heat and humidity that is produced from cooking a meal inside. So if it's possible, try to avoid doing that during the daytime when temperatures are at their high. If you can cook at night, that's great. Also, if people have the ability to cook outside, if you have a porch or an outside area where you could get a grill or a charcoal grill, make sure you check with your local law and local municipal law around having any kind of grill or fire. But if it's possible to do that, it can prevent a lot of heat from building up inside the house. Also using microwaves, crock pots, those produce a lot less heat than a traditional oven or stovetop. And then some other things too, right? If it's possible, you can cook meals at night and have meals saved that you can use during those hot hours during the middle of the day, and you don't have to turn on the stove. Also using your fridge and freezer as limited as possible, because just like during a power outage, the cool air in those will go quickly. So you want to avoid leaving those open for too long, trying to get your fridge or freezer organized in a way that's easy to access and you can get in and out of there quickly. Some other stuff too is making sure that you're using blinds over your windows. A lot of heat comes inside your house. It's been said that, you know, keeping those blinds closed from the morning when the sun comes out until it's down can reduce the heat inside by at least 10 to 15 degrees. You know, there's if you don't have blinds or your blinds aren't effective against heat, you can create your own using cardboard, and you just cover that in aluminum foil, and what that will do is reflect a lot of the heat rays that are coming in through the windows. Blankets and sheets can be used as well. It's just really important when you're putting those physical barriers in your window to make sure that you're taking them down at nighttime so you can allow cool air to enter the house. Blackout shades also work. Those are a little more expensive and you have to purchase them. But yeah, making sure your windows are open if it's safe. If you can do that at night in the early mornings, that will let a lot in, and then insulating them during the daytime. And you can do the same things with doors as well, trying to trap whatever cool air you have inside your house during the day and then release it at night. And air circulation is a big part of it. That can help pull humidity off your skin, and humidity is one of these things that it's not directly related to heat, but it can exacerbate the feelings of extreme heat. So trying to pull that moisture off your body is really important. If you have a ceiling fan, something that I just learned, the rotation of the fan actually makes a difference whether it's pulling air or pushing it down onto you. So if you set it to a counterclockwise motion in the summer, that's going to pull hot air and moisture off of your body. There's also some DIY solutions if it's difficult to you know, access an AC or afford an AC or afford the payments, which is a tough reality for a lot of people, particularly in areas where heat waves are at their worst. So the internet is full of different solutions and life hacks that are pretty easy to find. So here's some examples right here. You can use an oscillating fan and connect 2 water bottles to the back of it, and you just refill those with ice. You can just drain it, the water from the cap once it melts, but that pushes cool air through the fan. Another one that we actually do at our house in our basement is you can create your own dehumidifier, which is pretty much 2 buckets or a colander if you have that has the holes in the bottom. You fill that with rock salt or cat litter. Both can be purchased, you know, either at a hardware store or at the grocery store, and that will actually pull water out of the air. So placing that in a damp part of your house can lower the humidity, which in turn will lower the perceived heat or the physical temperature as well. But specifically to Brockton, when we look at extreme heat and going back to the heat island effect, Brockton is a very condensed urbanized area. So there's a lot of infrastructure and people living in a really small space. And because of that, there's not as much tree cover, there's not as much permeable surfaces. So a lot of heat is reflected and built up within the city. To your right, if you look at this graph, which we pulled from Bostonography, they do heat mapping work. You can see, you know, the center of Brockton and downtown Brockton has this bright yellow and orange extreme heat. And then I put to the left of it a map of all the local parks. And if you look, a lot of them line up where there's some cooler spots. So trying to put yourself, if you must be outside, which again, avoiding strenuous activity, avoiding being outside if you don't need to. But if you're someone who has to work outside every day, if you're a person who doesn't have a household to be at during the daytime, or you utilize shelters at night, it's really important to try to find shade and refuge from heat and try to get away from these reflective, you know, cement or asphalt surfaces. So one thing that was mentioned in this report was that one of the hottest parts of town is the intersection of Belmont Street and Main Street. So yeah, again, trying to stay away from the heavily urbanized areas and try to utilize things like local bodies of water or ponds or forested areas. And what the city is doing, the best way to get in touch is to go on their Facebook. They provide a lot of updates there, mostly about different changes. So they'll post things about tropical storms that are coming in, or they'll post about a heat wave, and they will promote heat wave or heat shelters as they come up, and information will be released on their Facebook. You can also call this number up here that I'm underlining with my mouse. That will bring you to the emergency management department. And the public pool in Brockton is also open, which again it's a body of water that can do a lot to keep cool. Obviously in the COVID area, that's a lot more nuanced now. So if you're someone who's immune compromised or you're elderly, we definitely wouldn't advise going to the pool. If you do go to the pool, obviously make sure to stay in line with all the COVID guidelines. But utilizing parks and bodies of water, if you must be outside or if you find yourself outside, can be a really good way to beat extreme heat. And then finally, within our own communities, Philip mentioned this, one of the greatest threats to all this climate change, extreme weather related stuff is inaction. So organizing as a community is extremely important. It's something that CREW promotes heavily. So building the idea of social infrastructure and cohesion amongst your fellow community residents can make our communities more resilient and protected away from extreme weather such as heat waves. So some really good ways to do this is setting up a check-in system. So getting in touch with all your neighbors, preferably before extreme weather strikes, trying to identify, who is the most vulnerable in my neighborhood, who is the elderly couple that might need help if we get a day that's over 95 degrees, and trying to foster and build those relationships so there's a level of awareness within the community of who might need assistance. Because one of the biggest things with heat-related illness is that a lot of fatalities can be preventable just by being there at the right time and providing water and cool air. But if without those check-in systems, without those community relationships, people can become forgotten, and our most vulnerable can fall fatality to things like extreme heat. So putting out flyers, making community announcements, some of the best ways to do that can be like through canvassing, but with the COVID era and that being a little more nuanced, apps like Nextdoor can be good ways. Getting in touch with community Facebook groups or neighborhood associations can be really good ways to start building those relationships, establishing lines of communication between vulnerable people and people who are willing to help those. So yeah, and trying to set up a system and build that social resiliency. And that's one thing that CREW really does. We have a thing called CREW teams where community members can come together and advocate for climate related issues in their towns, neighborhoods, or cities that they want to solve. And CREW will help provide strategy, planning, resources. So if there is anyone that's interested in starting a CREW team, you can reach out to on our website. We have a bunch of contact information there. You can get a CREW team started, and having something like a check-in system is what a CREW team might function as in order to keep their neighborhood community members safe. So I'm going to turn it over. That's the solutions that we have. And Andrew is going to talk a little bit about an AC assistance program. So I talked a lot about how, those are solutions for people that might not have AC, but collectively with our group, we're working to hopefully provide some AC to the people in the Brockton area. And Andrew can talk a little more about that.
Great. Thank you very much, Ethan. And so informative was this presentation to be able to learn on how we can, methods for the house and, household solution and a lot of cooling methods, avoid cooking indoor, all of those. So we were so excited. And we're happy that we have on this Zoom presentation our partner, CREW, which is Community Responding to Extreme Weather. along with self-help, we were able to secure grant funding to provide cooling assistance to those in need in the city of Brockton. You know, it's really, really good that we're able to touch and provide air conditioning units and other cooling technology to those who are most vulnerable in our community. So elderly, low income, disabled, or chronically ill, undocumented people, unhoused people, obese and infants, all are disproportionately impacted by extreme heat. And with this grant program that we are in partnership with CREW, we are happy that we're able to outreach to the City of Brockton community, vulnerable community who will require such assistance from this great project. And if you or someone you know is suffering from extreme heat, please reach out to us, or you will see our volunteers in the field. We are located at various locations, at the local restaurants, Caribbean restaurants, various restaurants. We are at the shopping centers. You'll see us reaching out to you, asking, or you could fill out the form online. If you go on the CREW website or the foundation website, you will see the link to be able to complete the form to be able to provide, we can be able to provide assistance to you. Applicants will be prioritized by the level of needs, and it is with great, great pleasure that we're able to really provide that assistance for those who are really in need, and especially our vulnerable community that are affected. So not just only the Caribbean American community, but if you find yourself, you're elderly that really needs that assistance, just reach out to us. We're happy that we have partnered with Self-Help, who is able to provide that assistance, can able to check to see if you're doing it right, and also can be able to connect you with the resources that is needed to provide that, you know. I always say knowledge is power. So that's why we're here. We're delighted to be able to partner and to be able to provide our residents of the City of Brockton with such great assistance. I mean, this workshop alone provide you with resources and how you can test yourself, and even more information can be given and can be obtained from self-help on what you're doing in terms of keeping yourself cool, any kind of providing assistance and so forth. And then CREW, the amazing CREW team, who is challenging the climate change, you know, making sure we all know everyone is affected